we in the back? Oh, some are gesturing. Sam or Jason or Kurt, could we get it up a little bit louder for?
It's going to be you adjusting that mic.
You got a wheel on it.
Oh, I must bring it closer. Does that really make any? Well, it makes some difference, I guess. Okay, so it might be better just to. It might be better to say nothing that's worth hearing, and then we could go directly to our more interesting panelists here. But I won't do. I will not do that because I do have some opening remarks. Hi, I'm Patty Limerick. I'm the faculty director of the center. Welcome to an evening that I have been anticipating with eagerness and really, actually, with elation and exhilaration. That could be measured with a blood pressure calculator. Yeah, any of you, because people here could verify that if I asked them for that. We would not be having this event, though, if it were not for the fact that two generous supporters of the Center of the American West make this possible. So, without the two people who I'm about to introduce, no Stegner Award and none of the evenings that we have come to take delight in. So, ladies and gentlemen, may I present the people who make this possible, Carol Ann and Al Olson. Please look at your programs to review the remarkable list of previous winners of the Stegner Award, although a review of that list will arouse the sorrow of the passing in the last months of two Stegner Award winners, the writers Kent Harif and Ivan Doig. And yet, tonight's program, in presenting the Stegner Award to the Rocky Mountain Rescue Group, would not have permitted us to look away from the reality of death and the way in which our lives at this moment are given intensity and vividness by the realization that we cannot claim an exemption from the boundaries and borders of the span of human life. There is a long history of people in the American West, I guess you could say, prolonging the span of individuals' lives, helping each other out. I have, from the first day that I took a Western history class, I have treasured the stories of people stepping forward to help people, for instance, stranded on the Overland Trail in the 1840s and 1850s, and many thousands of others who have rescued strangers in dire circumstances in western deserts or in calamities of floods or fires. I have loved reading and rereading those stories, and it is an extraordinary advancement in the quality of my life tonight to hear directly and in person the stories from a group who have mobilized on hundreds and hundreds of occasions when alerted that a person is in distress. It's just better not having to read it, but having them here. It's wonderful. Historian gone wild here in the company of historic figures. So, Rocky Mountain Rescue originated in 1947, and I am sure that we will hear more about its history in the course of the evening. At about the same time, groups with similar missions and visions were coming into being in the Pacific Northwest, but there is no question that the creation of Rocky Mountain Rescue was an important event in the history of the American West. I say that having just ceased to be the president of the Organization of American Historians, the largest group of American historians in the country, just terminated on Saturday night from that. So I carry authority when I say that this is a historic group, or I carried it until Saturday night.
When you wrote that, you carried it.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So it's a historic artifact itself here. So if you want more after this evening, and it is almost certain that you will, I would call to your attention Mark Scott Nash's book, Playing for Real, Stories from Rocky Mountain Rescue. You can get it from the group. Do we have copies today? No, we don't have copies tonight, so you'll have to order it. So that's easy enough to do. We got it very fast ourselves. And I will tell you that it is a book that is so intense to read that you genuinely do forget where you are. And the measure of that was that I was reading it on an airplane. And I was reading very intently, and I suddenly, the pilot said, we were about to land, we were pretty close to them, we were about to land, and I thought, good heavens, I'm reading the part on downed aircrafts at this point. But I didn't put that together because I was not in the plane, I was just reading these stories of rescue so intensely. So, I wanted to start with a historic story. This is not exactly a story of search and rescue, since the people in this story were traveling in the same party, and Jim Kleiman and Jedediah Smith were together when the calamity occurred, and Kleiman was thus positioned on the scene to respond. But it is certainly of an individual coming to the aid of a person in distress. And it is also an odd and interesting story because the victim also serves as the incident leader. So here is the story of Jedediah Smith, famous fur trapper in the 1820s in the American West, in the Black Hills, and he and his party small party. They came, Smith was in the lead, and a bear was in the path. So here is Jim Kleiman, the younger mountain man's telling of the story, recording of the story. He actually, these are his words. Grizzly did not hesitate a moment, but sprang on the captain, taking him by the head, breaking several of his ribs and cutting his head badly. None of us having any surgical knowledge, what is to be done, one said. And here they do not behave like any of the members of this group, because they spend a little bit of time saying, do you know what to do? I don't know what to do. I have no idea what to do. So the younger folks are not doing so well here. I asked the captain, Jedediah Smith, what was best. He said, 1 or 2 go for water, and if you have a needle and thread, get it out and sew up my wounds around my head, which was bleeding freely. So I got a pair of scissors and cut off his hair, and then began my first job of dressing wounds. Upon examination, I found the bear had taken nearly all his head and the bear's capacious mouth, close to his left eye on one side and close to his right ear on the other, and laid the skull bare to near the crown of the head, leaving a white streak where his teeth passed. One of his ears was torn from his, I'm sorry about this, but this is history, right? We might figure a little bit, so nothing quite, well, who knows? Things work well. Okay, moving on. One of his ears was torn, we already did that, okay. After stitching all the other wounds in the best way I was capable, I told him I could do nothing for his ear, which again has been torn entirely, almost entirely out. So, this is Jedediah Smith, quoted by Jim Kleiman. Oh, you must try to stitch it up one way or another, he said. Incident commander, I guess, on that one. Then I put in my needle, stitching it through and over, laying the lacerated parts as nice as I could with my hand. Water was found in about a mile. We all moved down and encamped, the captain being able to mount his horse and ride to camp, where we pitched a tent, the only one we had, and made him as comfortable as circumstances would permit. This gave us a lesson on the character of the grizzly bear, which we did not forget. A lesson on the character of the grizzly bear. Well, yes, but an equally memorable, if not more memorable, lesson on the character of the human beings and of their power to endure and persist, and also their power to come to each other's aid in impossible circumstances. So as far as I can see, Smith and Kleiman give some signs of being your predecessors or somewhere in that lineage. And now, just briefly to explain our custom for the Stegner Award presentation, the folks sitting around me will introduce themselves, and we have a program that has their bios, and then we are fortunate to have a person who joined in 1954, John Huff, join us as well. So they will all give brief bios rather than having me, when these people are here, why would I? Okay, so I won't. And then I will do an interview with them, and you'll be pleased to know, they'll be pleased to know that one of my notes says,
your favorite stories.
It says your favorite stories, so we'll get quickly to that. At the end of the discussion, we ask everyone, well, then we'll have, I hope, some time for questions from the audience. At the end of that, we will ask everyone who is affiliated with the Center of the American West to join. This will be faculty, students, board members, to join us in the front of the room. And we will also ask the current and retired members of Rocky Mountain Rescue. How many are here who are current or retired? Yay. Yay. We'll ask everyone to come up, and then I will read the citation for the Stegner Award, and then I thought I would present the certificate and the check, but it won't, because the certificate needs to be framed. It's quite beautiful, and the check is in the mail, so. And then there will be a reception in the room next door following that for more conversation. So we'll start by going around the group here, and we'll have some brief introductions from each member. So, Mr. Huff.
My name is John.
Oh, he's microphone's up here.
Let me turn this on for you. There.
I'm not of the electronic age.
Yep.
My name is Jonathan Huff.
Actually, you might, I'm afraid these are things we might actually have to hold in front of us. To
Hello, testing 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm Jonathan Huff. I joined the group as a high school senior in 1954.
Wow.
It was a very different group then, very small, and but just as dedicated and just as sincere in its work to save lives. For those of you those few of you here who are not members of the group, We basically do three things. We search for people going up the mountains, and we give them aid on the mountain, and then we carry them down the mountain. To work effectively in the group, there are only three things that matter. And one is preparedness. You have to be prepared and ready to go anywhere, anytime, usually in the evening and always on the weekend. You have to be reliable, and that means that you can be relied upon to do everything right the first time and every time. And you have to have trust. There will be times when you hold others' lives in your hands, and when you place your life in their hands. That's it. That's a brief description of it. In your program, it notes that the group was formed in 1947 after an incident with a child. There was a series of incidents that year, including one of standard, over the years, third flat iron offense. Somebody overdue, injured on the third flat iron. Over the years, individuals like Baker Armstrong, very noted climber of the era, had gone up to the third and given aid as best he could. But after this series of events in '47, a group of people, Mr. Hutchinson, Harold Walton, Pete Snow, Roy Hoybar, and some others, met with the sheriff in March of '47, and the rescue group was formed. Since then, we have been on call 24 hours a day, and I'm proud to say the rescue group has always responded 24 hours a day.
There you go. All right, does that work? Good.
Yep.
My name is Chuck Demarest. I was a latecomer. I joined in 1966, 12 years after Jonathan, and I'm kind of in the middle time-wise between the newbies here and Jonathan and others. Adding to what Jonathan said, at this point, literally thousands of rescues have occurred over those years, and we've never had a fatality in our rescue group and very few injuries over the years. So we're very pleased with that, knock on wood, of course. But it comes from the attention to detail, the training, and the hard work that people like Jonathan in the beginning and others since then have put in. So we're a very careful group. In terms of the types of rescues, I'd like to add a couple of things. One thing that Jonathan taught me when I was first becoming a member, he says, join the rescue group and see Colorado by headlamp. And indeed, there's a lot of truth in that. We do an awful lot of work at night. Tracking works better at night. Often people don't call until late in the day, and so we get out there and the sun is setting or has set. And we certainly have gone out and just about every imaginable weather that you can think of, from 60, 80 mile an hour winds on the Continental Divide in winter, 20 below zero if needed. Ice climbing on the third flat iron when some people have started up and then the storm came. Dave Christensen remembers that in the audience, having put his crampons on and worked on that particular incident. So anyway, that's about what I would add. My own bio, I'm a techie. I'm a urethane chemist in real life, and have started a few companies as an entrepreneur, and then found time to work with this group. And I'm pretty well versed in helicopter stuff, so that's been fun for me.
So I'm Ian Baringgold. I'm the current president of the Rocky Mountain Rescue Group and president of the board. So we have an operational arm, but with most organizations, you actually have the organizational arm that make sure the bills are paid and things of that nature, and I get to lead that. I'm a relative newbie, starting in '97, so I've been with the group not quite 20 years, and again, a newbie to the organization. One, I'm a mechanical engineer and work at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. That's my other day job. And I guess the one point I would put, and we'll move it on, is that the Rocky Mountain Rescue is an all-volunteer organization, and so our members donate their time. We never charge for rescue, and the idea is when people are in trouble, you want to be able to get to them as fast as you can. That's the safest way to do it, and that means they should never think about whether they should call on their cell phone or call for help. You want them to call for help and then get help, as compared to have them wait and then have something else go wrong.
I'm Steve Gendorf. I've been with the group 20 years and about 2 weeks. Still a newbie compared to these guys over here. I came out from New Jersey. I actually heard about the Rocky Mountain Rescue Group out there, and started getting involved once I got out here. And I'm an environmental engineer working for the Bureau of Reclamation down in Lakewood.
I'm Allison Sheets. Is that working? I'm Allison Sheets, and I've been a member with Rocky Mountain Rescue since 2006. I'm an emergency physician, and my involvement with the team was initially as a medical director, assistant medical director. But right from the start, I was interested in the technical aspects and the climbing aspects and the mountain aspects of it, as I used to be a climbing guide and a ski patroller. So after my medical training was done, I became a full member of the team as well as a medical director, and have been completely immersed in it ever since, sometimes more than I should be, but it does allow me to use my medical skills in a very unique way, taking care of people out in the terrain that I love and where I've spent a lot of time in my free time. I also do a lot of work for the team with the Mountain Rescue Association, which is the national arm of search and rescue in this country, and just recently finished doing some training last weekend with another local team. So that's a big part of my involvement, is the interface with the other teams in the region.
Let me add something. I'd like to add something that maybe we should also mention. When Rocky Mountain Rescue Group started, we were pretty much the only rescue capability in a very wide range of the Rocky Mountain area. And although the Mountain Rescue Association started in the 60s, prior to that there was a Seattle group. Well, when RMR got active, we were often going out of state and out of county to help around the entire region. That legitimizes us for Wallace Stegner's behavior in the Rocky Mountain and the West. So I wanted to make sure we legitimize our own position here. But then over time, other groups were formed, and now there's actually 19 members in the member groups in the Rocky Mountain region that are all part of the National Mountain Rescue Association. So things have really grown now. It's become a very capable rescue collection of groups and people throughout the region. So I just wanted to add that.
And in terms of Stegnerian quality, oh, I'm sorry, John.
Well, I would add one point here too, that there were rescue efforts, I mean, particularly in the Northwest, the Seattle Mountaineers and Portland Mazonas.
Mountaineers? Yeah.
Seattle Mountaineers, yeah. That did rescue things before 1947, but they were offshoots of mountaineering clubs. The Rocky Mountain Rescue Group is the oldest organization in this nation dedicated specifically to and operating only with mountain rescue.
Makes the case on history. For Mr. Stegner's, I did know Mr. Stegner pretty well, and it's always a mistake to claim to speak for someone who can't be here. But I do know this, that he appreciated and valued Western characteristics in strong individuals, and he appreciated even more when those strong individuals came together in an enterprise. So the regional reach, that's good. But I feel inner peace in thinking Mr. Stegner would be behind this. So that will be the end of my channeling for the evening. So what I want to do, actually I've had a little change in my plan here, is that I want to ask a question, and then I want to go directly to the favorite stories, because I have bet, going with myself, that most of my themes and topics here will be brought out in those favorite stories, and then that will spare us having a professor go through her themes here, and then we'll just see. And then if I have a couple of themes that do not appear in the stories, then we'll come to those. So we're switching the sequence there, that rather than going with my questions and then going to the favorite stories, we'll go there. But the first thing I want to just ask about is you and your pagers, because many of us in other lines of work, when summoned to activity, think, oh, for heaven's sake, I was doing X or Y, or I was about to do X or Y, and I thought I would do this, and I was planning on that, and now I have been summoned. And call to duty is, and that's not usually used in a particularly celebratory, well, this isn't celebratory, I guess, but it's a sort of, oh boy, there's my pager, or oh, there's this text, or here's this thing I have to go do. And your response to a pager, based on the folklore I've sampled, reading Mark's book, it's really different from a common human response of, well, I didn't plan on this. So could you, each of you, I'll start with you, Allison, just you and your pager and your relationship with your pager and the sensations that come to you with your pager.
Okay. That's kind of a funny question, because one of the reasons I chose emergency medicine as a specialty when I decided to go to medicine is that I wouldn't have to carry a pager when I got out of my training. And so a very monumental aspect of graduation from your residency is you can, you know, throw your pager in the toilet, or I thought about making a pager piñata and bashing it to pieces, but nevertheless, I was very happy to get away from my pager, and it is rather ironic that I immediately went into an activity that requires a pager. We can also use our cell phone, so it's not quite as onerous as actually having a pager. We are an all-volunteer organization, so I think it's good to say right up front is that we do not have to respond to the pager if we are unable to or can't. I simply can't leave work to go on a mission. That being said, there are times when we do. I know every single one of us here in the room from RMR will roll our eyes when the pager goes off at times if it's inconvenient for us, but there is nothing like a page that sounds exciting, real, desperate, you know, dangerous, or somebody truly badly injured and really needing our help. And I don't think there's one of us that doesn't, you know, without hesitation, get going and get in the car and get going as fast as they can and respond with enthusiasm and excitement and sometimes nervousness. So it is a bit of a love-hate relationship, but we do have the option of not responding. That being said, the amount of response from members on our team is mind-boggling. The amount of hours and the amount of missions that people go on. We had a member last year that went on 90 missions. That's many, many more than a lot of organizations ever have, that search and rescue organizations have. Many of the other search and rescue organizations have, they're lucky to have 90 missions in an entire year, let alone one person that goes on those 90. So although it's a love-hate relationship, I think that we all kind of honor our pager, and we honor our ability to provide the services to the people that need us and when they need us, even in the middle of the night, and that happens a lot.
Sure, I guess, I think the relationship to my pager has changed over the years. When I was in college, and you know, I had lots of time to give to the rescue group, and could go at any time, day or night, no problem, unless I have a final exam or something. So it's kind of I think it's a story of a lot of us in the rescue group, how times change. Sometimes in life you have more time, sometimes you have less. You know, we are all volunteers, so it's we all try to go when we can. And you know, when my pager goes off now, then I have to think about, well, who's going to take care of my 3 kids, and what's my wife going to say if I ask, hey, what about this rescue?
The family's relationship to the pager is very different than the member.
Yes, I see that. I should have expanded the question.
Yeah, so it's, you know, I always say after 8 p.m. I'm usually going no matter what. So, and it's just oh, well, I guess I was planning on getting sleep tonight, and I guess not.
It's also fun because it's an excuse. A lot of us are here, at least for me, living in the Rocky Mountains, you get caught up in life, you get caught up in work, you get caught up in your kind of, in your small world. And the pager is an excuse to get up to the Continental Divide at 2 o'clock in the morning. And,
oh, mercy.
and you would never, not that you would never, there are some people who will do that just because they think about it.
Oh, my goodness.
But for a geeky engineer like me, especially when I was younger, it was fabulous because it was the motivation to go and help someone clearly, and the idea of a large group of people kind of showing up at a trailhead to help somebody, really without tons of organization, just because 15 minutes ago someone called 911 and said I need help, or came running down the trail and said I need help. But it was that ability to kind of break out of whatever you were doing, regardless of what it is, and if you could go, you just drop everything and you walk out the door. And what happens for the next, could be a couple of hours, it could be 24 hours, is completely not something you thought about and you trained for, you did a lot of work for, but completely different every time. And that ability to do that, you don't do that in normal life, and the pager gives you that.
Well, back in the day, we didn't have these things called pagers. What's a pager? So it was a phone tree. And so a call would come from the sheriff's office to the group leader or whoever was supposed to answer. And then it was, he would call 2 and 4 and 8 or whatever the structure was. And of course, that's different because when someone calls you and you're on the phone, and he says, "You are going, aren't you?" It's a little different than just not hearing the beep. So now I carry a pager, but I personally don't go on many missions. I kind of specialize in search and maybe some tracking, but not the overhanging cliffs as much as years ago.
Okay, what is a pager? Chuck talked about the phone tree. We didn't all have cars. Part of the mission organization was whoever had a car would drive around town to pick people up. So it was a very different kind of system, a much simpler system, but the dedication to doing it is no different. I think that's my answer to your pager question.
How did you feel about being summoned by whatever mechanism or phone tree? What was your response when you got the word?
I probably wouldn't have said it at the time, but today I would say that it was the greatest opportunity I've ever had to serve.
So now I think we'll go to favorite story of a rescue.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm willing to start.
Go for it.
So when you're in this business and you've gone on a bunch of them, it's really hard to choose one that is your favorite. But one of mine was a woman who was hiking up by Rainbow Lakes, which is up near the Continental Divide. Just so happened that she was blind, and she went hiking with a number of friends, and she wasn't fast as they were, obviously, or something of that nature. So she stopped by the trail, and her friends went up, continued to hike up, and she sat there for a while, and her friends didn't come down because they went farther than they were expecting, and so she decided to start walking home, walking back down the trail. And she clearly got off the trail and was kind of wandering through the woods. And so we got, the friends came down the trail. She wasn't where they dropped her off. They got all the way down to the campground. She wasn't there, so they called 911, and we drive up there and start searching. And so one of the reasons that this is a fun one is I was one of the people who found her. And so that is always an exciting, someone who's out there who's lost, she's blind, okay? We knew she was blind person wandering around in the wilderness. And we found her, it probably took us an hour to kind of search for her and find her. But one of the reasons that this is a great story for me is she's blind. We find her by a lake that is in the kind of the upper Rainbow Lakes area. And her plan was she had found water and she was just going to follow the water down until she hit a road because she knew that she would cross a road. So it's fun for me because it's an example of not only us going out and helping someone, but us going out and helping someone who, in the spirit of the West, was going to find her way out of there no matter what. Even being blind up on the Continental Divide, she was not gonna stop. She was gonna find her own way out. We helped her. We probably speeded up the process by a day, but she was conserving her snacks. She had an apple that she had said, I am not going to eat this until I can't walk anymore and I have to stop. And so she was going to do it by herself, and we helped in that process, but she was going to do it.
Wow, this is a good one.
Well, I've been thinking about a whole bunch of them when I was asked to think of one.
Oh, you know what? I wouldn't worry about that.
No, you don't want to hear them all.
I don't think I said oh. I don't think I said oh, but or
Trust me. But the one I'd like to describe, I think, illustrates a couple of unique points about the group and on a very difficult rescue that could have gone sour. And this happened over Christmas on December 24th one year when there was heard by an airline a signal from an emergency locator beacon. And the airline reports that typically. They listen to that frequency, so it was reported. But there was no plane missing. Interesting. So they found this signal to be coming from the jet, said it's somewhere over the collegiate range. Okay, great. Can't search the collegiates in the middle of winter, not all of them. So the locals near Buena Vista started organizing something, and indeed it got to be quite a big deal. The Civil Air Patrol got involved, the National Guard got involved, RMR did not get involved at that point, and they tried to track this signal, and unfortunately it was very difficult because it was bouncing off cliffs. And even into the third day, there was no reported plane missing. So the story went around that in fact what happened was that somebody was playing a hoax, and they had thrown one of these emergency locator beacons out the window just to, make a fuss and everybody'd get excited, ha ha. So then they called RMR to come in, and we came over there, and some of our guys are highly technically oriented in terms of electronics, in terms of reflected radio waves, things like that. And we started to put together a pattern that might make some sense. So we had helicopter support on that day, and we flew a team to the top of Columbia on the side of that, and they tried to use our antennas up there. We flew another team to another high mountain, yet still the signal was really quite elusive. And these beacons are only supposed to last 72 hours. That was their specification. Well, now we're getting into the fourth day. It's still believed to be a hoax. There's still no plane reported missing. The National Guard said, we've had it, that's enough, we're going home. Civil Air Patrol said, we've had it, we're going home tomorrow morning. Well, that afternoon, I was picked up by a helicopter and flown up into the region, and I used a little electronics trick that I don't need to describe, but it gave a better location for the beacon than what had been seen from the other antennas. So the helicopter dropped me off in a clearing, very, very deep snow, with a group. And one member of the group, myself, we started trying to track the beacon on the ground. And we, after about something like maybe 2 to 3 hours, we'd gone a quarter of a mile, maybe a half a mile, in waist-deep powder snow. In spite of our snowshoes, it didn't help. Well, I got a little stronger signal, and I came back to the heliport area. They picked us up, flew us back to base. Well, now the game got really interesting. National Guard, we're leaving. Civil Air Patrol, we're leaving. We've had it. This is a terrible hoax. And they were cursing at the people. Well, I had to leave myself, actually, for a business trip to California, but There's a member of the group named Bruce Bartram, who I don't think is here tonight. I haven't seen him. But Bruce is a very unique critter. He is the most stubborn member in the history of the group. And when I mean say stubborn, he's also very bright, but he's very stubborn. He doesn't take no for an answer. So his problem was, Chuck found that signal. Now I know that Chuck knows what he's talking about, and I know he had to be within about a half a mile of the actual beacon. We can't let this go. But without helicopter support, it was hopeless. So he made a deal. And he went to the National Guard helicopter folks and he said, take me and a small team in, drop me off where you dropped Chuck off. I'll go out of the helicopter, I'll open my antenna, and if I don't get a signal because the beacon has probably died, then I'll get back in the helicopter and we'll fly home, and that's the end of it. But if I do get a signal, then I'll track it along his tracks and get the signal found. So they said, well, you know, okay, it was a good compromise, and that's why it worked. So they flew him into that site the next morning. He got out of the helicopter, walked to the edge of the helicopter area in the snow, unfolded his antenna, made a signal to the helicopter, and started off. Now, no one knows to this day whether he actually had a signal or not. Truthfully, he would not say. And all I can tell you is that, sure enough, he and his team marched up the trough that I had made to the end of it. He tracked the signal then another perhaps quarter mile, 3/8 of a mile, and guess what he found? He found an airplane. And inside the airplane were 3 survivors who had lived those 5 days with broken bones, trauma, frostbite, and so on. And of course, suddenly all was forgiven when that occurred, and they were rescued. The pilot died. He, on the crash, had attempted to walk out, and his body was found about 200 yards or so from the airplane, indicating you can't do that in that kind of snow. But anyway, I think that's a fun story because it shows how the persistence, don't take no for an answer, and of course the technology and skill that Bruce had to do it and his stubbornness saved those lives very clearly.
I like it. I don't have a story quite that dramatic. I hadn't actually heard that one before, so that was good for me to hear. I'm going to tell a story about El Dorado Springs call. That's where I live, and that's where I've spent so much of my time. I used to guide as a climbing guide there, and I still live out there, so the El Dorado calls are always near and dear to my heart. I'm not sure why I bring this one up, but it's got some funny aspects to it. I was actually working an overnight shift. I work in Longmont at the Longmont United Hospital in the emergency department there, and my shift ends at 7 o'clock in the morning usually, and that means I actually get out at 7:30 or 8 o'clock, and I'm hanging out in the morning, and the pager goes off. There's the pager, and I had it with me, and it's climber fall in El Dorado Springs at 7:30 in the morning, which is quite unusual. Most of the calls we get there in the afternoon. There's people that go out there in the morning and climb, but it's not that common to get an early morning one. I'm like, well, 7:30, you know, it's going to be a half an hour before I can get out of here. I'm probably not going to be able to make a difference on this call or do anything on this call. So I finish my business and take off, head home. I'm in my scrubs. I have some of my gear, but I'm not really prepared yet to go out. I've just worked overnight. I've been up all night. And I drive into the canyon, and I'm like, well, I'll just go see what's going on. You know, maybe they're still up there. And I drive up, and sure enough, there's RMR vehicles and trucks and cars going on. And I'm still in my scrubs and sleep deprived and hungry, and I kind of wander up to the truck and operations like, you know, what's going on? You know, anything I can do? And about this time, I'm hearing chatter on the radio, and there's a guy who had fallen about 100 feet, which for those of you who are climbers is, as you may know, or even if you're not a climber, falling 100 feet is a long ways. Anybody can understand that. But he was on a rope, so he fell 100 feet on a rope, and the rope caught him, and he was still alive. The deal was these 2 guys had gotten up early in the morning to try to climb 100 pulled off a hold and taken this really big fall. And he was being held up by the rope by his other climber. So I kind of get a sense of what's happened, and I'm like, well, you know, there's plenty of people here. I'll just watch. Maybe I'll go to my house and get my camera and take some pictures. That's about what I'm up for after a night shift. So I did that, and I changed. I put some regular clothes on, and I brought my camera up and, you know, listened to radio chatter. And this guy who's hanging on the wall there, and who some of our team are trying to stabilize and get secured and get packaged, and, you know, the whole plan is to get him off, and he's going to need a litter up there to get him off. And he was head injured. And, you know, for those of you who know, or those of you who don't, when you get head injured, you can act goofy, you can be a little combative, depending on how badly injured you are. And he was awake, he was talking, he was moving all of his arms and legs, he wasn't paralyzed, but he was head injured, and he was combative, and there was some sense in his, you know, reptilian brain in there that whatever's going on, he wanted to keep himself safe, so he's trying to climb back on the rock, and he's kind of swatting people away, and they're trying to put a sea collar on him, and he's, you know, not cooperating because he's not sure what's going on because he's head injured. So one of our other members, who's a physician's assistant, hears rumor that I'm down at the operations and says, "Get Allison up there," because he knows I'm an ER doc and have a way with talking to patients. I'm like, oh, good God. You know, so I'm pretty sleepy, but that kind of woke me right up, and I ran down to my car and got my stuff, and off I go. And, you know, to get up there, I have to climb a rope, Jumar up a rope, which, you know, after a night shift isn't easy. It's not easy when you're ready for it, let alone when you're sleep deprived and half brain dead yourself. And so I get up there, and, you know, it's a bit of chaos because this guy is kind of all over the place. He's a big guy, and he's a bit confused, and he's insisting on trying to put his own equipment back in the rock and trying to stabilize himself. And myself and at least one other person in this room were up there, and a few other people were trying to talk to him. And so I did what I do in the emergency department, which is get right in somebody's face, and instead of asking them to stop moving and listen to us, I tell him what to do, which kind of made all the difference. And that was really, I guess, the reason why they wanted me up there. But it was more than just telling the patient what to do. I also then ended up having to help package him. He was lowered in a litter. It was a 600+ foot lowering. Pretty exciting when you're hanging from 600 feet of rope and on a litter on this very vertical rock. And so we got him in the litter, and he's kind of just aware enough. So I was like, is this safe, he's asking me? Is this safe? Because the litter is on 600 or 350 feet of rope at that point. And so when he gets in it, it kind of bounces and moves, and you're like, is this safe? Yes, it's safe, we'll be fine. And so I ended up going down on the litter with him and being lowered pretty much into the arms of, you know, a dozen more rescuers. And that's the amazing thing about these big calls where, you know, there's a lot of technical difficulties to overcome. We oftentimes will call for other teams to come help us if need be. And so down we go, and we get to the ground, and, you know, I'm dealing with what I've got, but I don't have to do anything else. Suddenly I'm literally kind of lowered into the arms of the rest of my group. And obviously I wasn't the person that was injured. The patient was then whisked away down the rest of the technical terrain and put into an ambulance, and the ambulance drove down the road and into a helicopter, and the helicopter took him into Denver to a trauma center where he was taken good care of and actually had a good outcome. He did have a head injury, but he had a good outcome and went on to climb again. But the amazing thing is, I've been a rock climber, an outdoors person long before I was ever a rescuer, and I've been a citizen in the West, and I've always admired the individualism of people in the West and what those great personalities can accomplish, climbers being a great example of getting out there and doing spectacular things. And I've enjoyed climbing immensely my entire life, or my entire adult life. And yet the cooperation and the bringing together of multiple people in a team like this, and other people outside of our team, to accomplish what no single person could ever do is really what brings this group together, what keeps us happy and keeps us excited to do what we do. And seeing that sort of smooth transition from one team to the next team to the next team to the next team really brings it all together for the community spirit and the cooperation that I see in this group, and that I think is representative of the West in this country.
So we all knew we probably have to give a story or two, and thinking through this over 20 years of rescues, I was thinking, what is my viewpoint of Boulder? And I think we all love looking at the Flatirons, and on my commute to work, I drive down 93 on the bus, and I can overlook these Flatirons, and sometimes I just see some beautiful mountains, and sometimes I just think about all the rescues I see from 20 years, and I think it's kind of a skewed viewpoint to kind of think about the terrain, like, oh yeah, that rescue there, and that one, and that one, yeah, this one. But I just want to share a few things, and Ian, you mentioned finding the lost person, and so one of the stories I was thinking of was we had a middle of the night search up at Brainerd Lake in the middle of the winter, and it's cold, snowing, and I was fortunate to be on one of the teams that did find the lost person. Just hearing the voice of a lost person calling back is pretty stunning. Especially on searches, it involves a lot of teams spread out. You never think you're going to be the one that's going to find them, and it's just kind of a special moment, especially in the middle of the night and it's dark, and just hearing a response to your calls out.
Can I just ask you, when you're looking, you're calling the person's name, or so, and then someone says. Yeah.
So on a search, you're usually calling and then listening, and your normal response is nothing. So over and over, search after search after search, and to actually get a response it's pretty amazing. So.
Especially when you're not sure you hear the response the first time.
Yes, right. Yes, right.
Yeah.
It's really faint the first time usually, so it's great. Did I just, you kind of look around like, was that you talking, or was it someone else? But I'll share one story of. Well, it's one that stuck with me. I think we all have ones that stick with us a little more, and hopefully not in a kind of a PTSD kind of way, but kind of.
There are too many of those.
Yes. So this one was up on a mountain called Coffin Top. Maybe some of you are aware, up in the South St. Vrain. And we were called to I think came in as a missing party from his group. This is an older gentleman, and we spent quite a bit of time searching the poison ivy infested valleys of the South St. Vrain. My allergy to poison ivy has increased steadily since I joined the rescue group. I learned my lesson on this one. I'll get to that in a second. And we had a helicopter flying around trying to find him. And we eventually found him on the backside of Coffin Top. He had fallen, injured his head, and we're building our team there, getting ready to evac him, and you could see he was slowly, going downhill. On head injuries, a lot of times you can't do anything for him except try to get him out as fast as possible. So we started this one with, we were talking to this gentleman pretty coherently. I could tell he was hurt, and just over time on the evacuation, you could see him going downhill, and eventually he died on the way out. And I think these ones are pretty tough. We don't have a lot that are not already dead or dying the way out, but this one really stuck with me. So most of our rescues are happy endings. We usually get them to the ambulance. They usually get out, or to search, and they're usually found. But this one didn't happen like that. And on top of this one, I had on my way out, in addition to the poison ivy, I ended up breaking my thumb Slipped and caught myself, broke my thumb, and it turned out I had poison ivy also on my hand, which then got put in a cast. And then I had a wedding I was usher at a week or two later.
Probably someplace hot and humid, right?
Yeah, it was humid. So I poisoned it all over myself, and that was another reminder, you know, of the rescue not long ago. As I'm taking a knife and itching it under my cast. Yeah, I wanted to share that. It's something, you know, we do face dangers. Sometimes it's just poison ivy, sometimes it's slipping. We try to do our best to mitigate those dangers.
All right, let me tell a happy one very quick.
John, John, and then certainly
Yeah.
Chuck.
Okay. I'll tell 3 short stories that in my mind illustrate the best and the worst that rescue group.
Can you hold that closer to your mouth?
Yeah, these are not the fight. Do we have anything?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Is it?
Try that. No, this is on.
Testing. Okay. Okay. I'll tell 3 short stories
That's better.
that illustrate.
Really put it close to your lips.
Okay.
Maybe that.
Wow.
This seems like some technique we're using right here.
Swallow it.
Actually, I think it was much better, actually, Lynn. I think it's better just as you had it there, without the swallowing part. I don't think that really helped us much. But just, yeah, I don't think you need to impair your speech with it. I think if you just hold it right in front of you, it's good.
It's just so impaired anyway.
No.
No, 3 short stories to try and illustrate.
Further out, right about 2 inches out.
All right. 3 short stories to try to illustrate sort of what is the best and
A
the
little bit
worst.
further, because we're getting them a little back here. So I think we're talking about something like sort of right about there. Right about there. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then treat them as if they're deaf and speak up a little bit to them.
Okay, 3 short stories to try to illustrate what, to my mind, is the best and the worst of what the rescue group gets into. We go to the Continental Divide at 2 o'clock in the morning. We went on a mission to Navajo Peak, up in the Indian Peaks, where it was raining all night. And the entire mountain was running with water. And the victim was 300 feet out across the north face in a crack. We had to get to him and lower him down. Well, there's an old way of grading climbs that predates the decimal system. Interesting is a climb you'd rather not lead again right now. Impressive is a climb that you'd rather not even follow again right now. And fascinating is a climb that you don't want to go anywhere near ever again. Traversing the north face of Navajo in running water was a fascinating climb. We got to the victim, and it's a standard policy of every rescue group everywhere. Use multiple anchors for safety. We put in 1 piton, right? And we lowered the victim, and we lowered us on 1 piton. Okay, that's the reality of what you get into and what you have to do.
It was a solid piton.
Damn right. I don't believe you. Not an A5 piton, no. The third Flatiron, of course, has classic stories forever. Christensen was referred to as the ice climb. Well, the first 2 crampon, verglass, blizzard, night ascents of the third Flatiron occurred years ago. 1 year, and again, exactly the same date on the next year. So we were up there, and leading the third Flatiron, of course, has absolutely no protection. So you're cramponing up, And this is before ice tools. What you have in each hand is an angled piton in your fist, just smashing into the parallels. And so you climb through 3 pitches that way. And when you start, you can hear the victims still calling out. And when you get to the victims, they're dead. So that's sort of the best the rescue group can do and the worst that it runs into all at the same time. And the third one, you get the call in the afternoon. The Jefferson County Sheriff is reporting a young boy trapped on the rocks above the Red Rock Amphitheater in Morrison. So we go zipping down there. And here's this 7-year-old kid who has somehow gotten 100 feet out horizontally on a ledge system, and he's stuck. And he's been there for several hours. So, okay, the Alpine Rescue Group and the RMR were both there. You lead out over this 100-foot ledge, and it's just like any other big sandstone. There is absolutely no place to put in a nut or a piton or anything else. So you lead out, and you get to the kid, and you tie a few slings around him and sort of sling him over your shoulders and start to come back. And you're working your way across, and you're thinking, okay, I'm still 90 feet away from my belay, but I'm only 60 feet above the concrete sidewalk. There are leads like this that we just do. Now, the worst part of this climb, actually, of the whole rescue, was that the media had been alerted. And working your way back across these ledges with this kid on your back who's kicking the rock because he doesn't know what's happening. And this voice comes up from below. Hey, you in the blue, turn around so we can see your face. Oh, I have a blue hard hat and a blue shirt on top. You know, this was a Rocky Mountain News photographer. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I made it a point of honor not to turn around. So we got back across the ledge, and I turned the kid over to the leader of the Alpine Rescue Group, who carried him down the rest of the way. It had to be the worst non-news day in the world. That became a full color front page Rocky Mountain News picture. And it got picked up by the AP, and not the picture, but at least the story about it came back to me in clippings from 16 different papers, including the U.S. Army News, which is printed for all the soldiers overseas. In the process of all this, every detail and every name got changed. We're used to that. We have all been on missions where we read the paper the next day and we're saying, was that the mission we were on? So, okay, that's my story.
Well, I have a very quick one. I wanted to cheer things up after some of what happened over on my left. This is one of my favorite very short stories. On the second Flatiron, a chap was up there climbing, and wouldn't you know, he broke his leg, and he's on the face of the second Flatiron. So myself and others, we climb up there, we get to him, we strap him into a litter. Now, of course, this is the middle of the night. This was probably about midnight at this point, and we start lowering the litter down the face of the second Flatiron. Second's a little unusual, that if you kind of go straight down, you come to a lip where there's a vertical section actually overhung, and that means you're going to be in free space with the litter. Okay, well, we've certainly done that. That's not too threatening. And we go over, myself on one end of the litter, another rescuer on the other, and the way we work is we have a radio and we say lower, stop, and we can keep the litter level by saying down head. So the head will be lowered in order to keep the litter level, which is what we usually want. So as we're going down, I look to my right, which was north. and I see the most magnificent aurora borealis. Absolutely phenomenal. And I don't know what year it was, but I tried to look up a few of the major ones. There might have been 72 or 82, but for rather a long time ago. And so here we are, and this poor guy's in the litter with his broken leg, and we're all Googling at this fantastic aurora borealis. Well, feeling guilty, what I did is I said, down foot. We tilted the litter until he was almost standing upright. And of course he's strapped in tightly, so there really wasn't any danger of him falling out or even hurting his leg. But he got to see the aurora. On down the road.
One other little story that comes to mind. We had a report on a climber who had fallen off the maiden, landed on the ground, and is still alive. And that's 300 feet. Okay, so we were racing up there. There was nobody anywhere near the maiden. Okay, and it turns out they were on the devil's thumb and they didn't know the difference. But the story is that in those days we had big bulky radios. Well, we had 2 big bulky radios in the whole rescue group, and they had 2.5-foot steel whip antennas. And in the process of crawling all over the maiden in the middle of the night, the aerial broke off the radio. So suddenly we were out of communication completely. Well, the guy I was with was Dave Lewis, who's also well-known and very well-respected, wonderful member of the rescue group. And Dave is a physicist. So this was in the days, which some of you may remember, when zippers were made out of metal. So we stuck the bottom of the Hollywood Parker zipper to the stub end of the antenna and zipped it up and down until we got the right wavelength to transmit. Now this is rescue group improvisation.
I wanted to ask, I think I want to go back to the gloom for a moment here, because Joe Stepanek, who could not be here, was quoted as saying, "Tragedy does strike, and it hits the rescuer early, and those shards stay in the soul for a lifetime." So that leads me to the question of how your encounters with death, the saves that do not work, are you different from much of humanity? Are you able to get upset over what seem inconsequential and trivial things, or do you go back into a normal, oh, for heaven's sake, the stoplight is changing, oh my lord, is that very irritating? I mean, can you do, or do you live with a different kind of consciousness of where we are in the world and what could become of us in the next minute? So how does that awareness of death and the fact that that stays in your soul, those encounters, does that change you? And what, it seems to me that we might be a better society if more people shared that awareness. But I would assume at times you're just angry that you forgot something at the grocery store that you meant to get. I mean, there must just be much of regular life coming back at you.
First of all, there's all the times that we're only here because we were lucky when we were teenage drivers.
Well, there you are. Yeah.
So that's where you learn first, if not some tragedy. Okay. As far as rescue group, my experience and those people that I'm familiar with, there's a total detachment. Now it may come back to you later, but during a mission you're detached.
In the mission, yeah.
Now my which I didn't give, biography is that I work with juvenile delinquents, and I specialized in the diagnosis and treatment of violent offenders, specifically rapists and murderers. So my position is probably different than anyone else's.
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe 2 things. And one thing I didn't mention on this coffin top mission was I was, I mentioned we were talking to this person initially, and then he eventually passed away. But what I actually remember most about this, besides my poison ivy in the cast, was I was there at the end of his life, and talking to him, and that was really special. And obviously, I think people have that experience with close family and etc. But at that age, having experienced that was certainly unique. But I think the other part about life, and at least my experience with going on missions where people have died, is how alive people are. The difference between someone that's died and you really see how alive people are. So when you see a body, it's so disconnected from, so different, like the spirit of someone. And I think that's what stays most with me, like that just the difference between life and death.
As a doctor,
well, my relationship with death as an emergency physician is a little bit different than a lot of people's in our group, but not so different. And one thing I think is worth saying, and it's probably something that people here don't really know about, is how many suicides we actually respond to. And there's half a dozen a year completed suicides that we respond to, so those people, we're not saving them, but we are recovering their bodies. And that's a special kind of horror and a special kind of difficulty, and I think some of those are maybe worse in some ways to deal with and process. Oftentimes they're hangings or gunshot wounds, and so what you find is pretty grotesque and pretty horrible, and that can be extremely difficult, and some of our members really don't want to deal with that, and there's part of me that doesn't want to respond on those, and we can, again, choose not to do that. But we all have had, I think everyone in the group has gone on these, and those I think are difficult for us because we're used to dealing with people who are out in the wilderness, who want to be there, they're active, they're healthy, they're engaged, and some mishap occurs, and yet we also go on these people who've gone and purposely taken their lives, and I think there's some resentment that we get. Why did they go out in the middle of nowhere where we really have to search for them for a long time? Why didn't they do it somewhere where they were easy to find? Or why did they choose to do it at this time, this day, this place? Because forever that place will hold that memory for us, and that can make things especially difficult in the long run. So that's a unique part of search and rescue that I don't wish on anybody, but it's certainly something we have to deal with a lot. The deaths that occur in front of you, I think, are the most difficult by far, the kind that Steve was talking about, where you have someone who's awake and talking or alive, and then they die in front of you, are extremely hard on everyone, and I don't think you can be detached from that, because you're involved in the patient and you're talking to the patient, and then they pass away in front of you, and that detachment isn't an option. And we do try to have debriefs. We try to get together and talk as a team, and that's one thing where our teamwork is extremely effective, in that going for beers afterwards, or sitting there and talking to your buddies, talking to your homies, as I call them, our team, and talking it over and over is the best way we have to process those difficult situations. And so as a team, I think we work extremely effectively that way without really acknowledging it. We sort of do it automatically. And so those are some of the thoughts that I've had with death and tragedy in our team. And then just lastly on that, some of the most tragic things are when people don't die, when they're maimed and their lives are changed and their entire families suffer. And a short story, and this is one that just happened this winter. Early morning, Sunday, powder day, you get a call. Again, these early morning ones, they're not good. 7:30 in the morning, somebody's fallen and back pain, and they're in a cabin. And so we're all kind of like, what cabin is this? And why can't you drive to the cabin? Why can't the fire department get them? Why do we have to get involved? Well, it's a little cabin that was built in the last year up in near the Eldora ski area near the Hesse Trailhead. And this couple had built this little cabin on a mining site, and it was their great little ski cabin, and you know, future fun for a long time was what they had in mind. And in the morning, the gal had come down from the loft and gone out to pee, went back in, climbed up on the ladder in the loft, and ladder cut loose. And she fell down, and she broke her back. And she not only broke her back, she injured her spinal cord. And so she was laying on this cabin floor, unable to move. And so we kind of get a sense of this as you're coming in. And it was very difficult to get up there. The snowmobiles couldn't make it. You had to ski, and there was a ton of new snow, and it was, you know, it was hard. It was hard work. And then you get there and you realize it's like, holy cow, you know, I know what's going on. I'm a doctor, and I see this kind of stuff. But everybody knew this is not good. This young lady is paralyzed. And so again, team effort, you know, it was Rocky Mountain Rescue, it was Nederland Fire, it was AMR, it was, you know, a bunch of groups pulling together to get her out of there. We got her out of there. And then I ended up going to the hospital to get some of her equipment back, and, you know, had the opportunity, good, bad, or otherwise, but the opportunity to talk to her significant other and see his pain and see his sorrow as she was being evaluated, and the reality of what had happened sinks in. So while death can be terrible and tragic, and there's no way to minimize that tragedy, sometimes the people that don't die, that survive, are sometimes the saddest stories.
Or I would add the happy stories. I think one of the things that we do when we help someone who is deceased, whether they've committed suicide or whether they've died on the trail, is bringing the remains back for the family, and how important that is to the family. And there are still times when we have family members that come back. Justin Colonna is a good example, who died of exposure up on Arapahoe. And his family comes back on a regular basis and hikes up to the place where his body was found, and our members go with him. Because it's important. All of us don't maybe not realize how important it is when we lose a loved one to be able to have that experience and understand that the loved one is safe, even though they're not really safe. And having the rescue group be able to participate in that and help a family through that process sometimes is magical.
Team. I will say that Mr. Stegner would really have valued this. His books are not a walk in the park walk in the park, I didn't really. Anyway, what I meant to say is that when I read Mr. Stegner's book, Crossing to Safety, I happened to be on a small plane out of Cortez, and the last 50 pages of Mr. Stegner's book are such an intense confrontation with mortality that I tested human nature, because I was on this plane and I got to the last 50 pages, and I realized I was just going to be sobbing. And then I thought, does that disturb the other passengers, do you think? Do they think you know something? And so I thought, well, we'll just test it. But it was Wallace Stegner who gave us that experimental situation. So I think that's right. But I think Mr. Stegner would really have wanted me to ask this next question, which is a very material question, but really gets at teamhood. And it wasn't till I read this book that I had any sense of what's going on when 6 people are carrying a litter on a scree evac, and the different roles of the 2 or the 3 pairs of 2. And that passage in this book, at that point, you don't ever in the rest of your life have to say, I wonder what teamwork means.
And it goes beyond that, because it's the 6 people on the litter, but it's also
of course, yeah,
the person who's up above, or the 2 people that are at the other end of the rope. That if we didn't have that, the 6 people and the victim would be tumbling down. And it's the person who is 100 yards farther down below the litter, saying go this side of the tree or this side of the tree. And it's the person farther down below that, and it's the other litter crew that is standing in the wings, so that when I'm exhausted and can't hold on to that litter anymore, all I have to do is say, I'm out of here, and 2 people will be in that spot in a heartbeat. And so it's a system, and it's a complete team. And then you have that team, and then you have the other team that is responding to the second mission that was just paged 5 minutes ago. And it's the third team that responds to the third mission that goes off 2 hours later. So it is a team that you don't find, I mean, you find it other places. I haven't found it other places, but I'm sure it exists out there. But 60 people, 80 people who volunteer their time to do this on a Saturday, and then their families that are willing to allow them to do this when the pager goes off. It is a miraculous group of individuals, and half of us are going to be getting up and walking out the door.
Is that right?
Right now.
Goodness. Well, for heaven's sake. Other things.
No surprise.
And we didn't plan that, honest.
Wow.
But that is a classic example of what really happens.
For heaven's sake.
Give us a second.
This never happens to historians, I'll just tell you. They never say, urgent need, historian, come quickly. So,
No historical emergencies.
good heavens sake.
It's not coming through.
Wow.
That's what we're all wondering. What's going on?
Sunshine Fire. Respond to Tin Hill Trailhead 301 Sunshine Canyon Drive. Again, 301 Sunshine Canyon Drive. Sorry, lost party.
Lost party. I think maybe we should give this award pretty fast, or is that?
They've already gone.
Okay.
Oh.
We have enough.
They've already there.
So, as we're saying, you have multiple teams, so we'll have a group
Well,
of people that go
I've never seen a spoken remark get demonstrated so fast in my life. That's just like a prophetic, well, it's not prophetic, I guess, it's just something you can see coming.
just the way it is.
Wow.
I wanted to give one visual of the team, and this happened I think this past winter, and I was driving into a rescue in El Dorado Canyon kind of late in the game, and but there's usually still a job for you even if you're showing up a little late. And this was coming off near Red Garden Wall and down really steep hillside, and driving in I could see this swath of light that went from the road across the river and all the way up to the cliff to where this person fell. And you could just see all the different people working the line, from the people that are behind on the scene where the person fell, to the whole litter team coming down, to the people ahead preparing for the tie rowing across the river. And it was such a nice, I wish I had time to stop and take a picture of it.
Yeah.
I had to help out, but it was just this blazing white line of rescuers, and this is really, it really showed the teamwork aspect.
That aspect of teamwork is very important, and is what the rescue group is built on. But there's another emotional aspect to the teamwork, and that is there are 40, 50, 60, 80 people, whatever number is in the group. You get any group of 50 people together, you're not going to like everyone. You're not going to be friends with everyone. And yet you trust your life to them, and they trust their life to you. And that's a very different kind of emotional teamwork that does exist.
I joined the group, and then several years later, my spouse joined the group because he was tired of hanging out on the weekends when I was off doing fun missions. But one thing I tell people who are interested in the group, I say a lot of things. It's a big commitment. You'll, never plan a dinner party again, and all these things. But it becomes your family, and that transcends the teamwork. Yes, the teamwork is so important, and yeah, you trust your life to people. But what really ends up happening is, this group becomes your family, and that's the ultimate teamwork, I think.
The rescue group has parties. Parties.
Well, square dances. And my understanding is that
people occasionally drink liquid.
Well, there's this is good news, but my understanding was that
sometimes the beeper goes off in the middle of drinking a liquid at a party.
Oh, I see the point.
Okay. And there's a classic story from 1949 where two members of the group were both climbing up South Chimney on the third Flatiron, searching for the party overdue on the third. And one says, "What a hell of a way to sober up." The other one says, "You too?"
Well, that's good. Well, so I want to recognize that in the audience is someone who is going to have a hard time choosing where to stand when we all cluster Center of the American West, friends and affiliates and students and graduates, and Rocky Mountain Rescue. And there's, to my knowledge, there's only one person who is going to have a conflict of which group to, and there's Drew Hildner, who worked at the Center of the American West and is a Rocky Mountain Rescue person, and so he just raised his hand. And
yeah, I was going to interlope if you would let me.
When did I ever stop you?
Kind of tying two things together, the question about teamwork and kind of how we handle kind of death and that in the group, and I think that's the important thing as well about teamwork is it doesn't end with the technical rescue. Is it these ones can get to you, and for different reasons. It could be that the kid you helped out reminds you of the kid that you've got, or kind of something that you've done, or something like this. And these ghosts follow you around in terms of the topography of the area. But when I joined the group, I thought it was, I was younger and I was a member of the Center of the American West, and I thought it was kind of very rocky. This is a macho thing, and the first fatality was actually my first mission with Chuck Demarest, and I thought it was something you put a brave face on, you suck it up, and but that's the thing that is impressive, is that the phone calls the next day, and how are things going? Is everything all right? And you can certainly say, hey, I'm not doing all right. You want to go grab a beer and kind of talk about it, and that's the teamwork aspect as well. And so there's, in the moment, you kind of take in these visuals, these experiences, kind of all these things that do have an effect on you, but it's not until you often kind of get home and you're away from the other rescue group members, and suddenly you're washing someone else's blood off your arms, and you're by yourself, and that's when you call other team members and say, hey, let's go do something together. And that's the aspect of teamwork that I think continues, is that ability to be kind of open and say, hey, this is really getting to me. And just having other people just kind of doing a phone tree the next day after something big and kind of saying, how's everyone doing, and all of that. And I think that's an amazing thing from a teamwork standpoint, and that's something that it emotionally sticks with you to see other members. You weren't there on that particular call, or you didn't end up seeing the body, but you just see that 1,000-yard stare on other members' faces, and that's something that sticks with you.
Yeah. Well, let me comment on that. Yeah, obviously over the years I've been in a number of those types of situations. And I would point out that this group has a tremendous dichotomy in psychology. And that's, the title of this book is Playing for Real. And so we have a very playful attitude about a whole lot of what we do. On the other hand, we all know we're playing for real, and that the person's life may be on the line, our safety may be on the line, and we can have a lot of good fun joking, and that's kind of how we also compartmentalize some of the issues that we deal with. In the end, it's always a personal thing when you have someone who either dies under your care or you're dealing with a body that's traumatic. And that's certainly the way I deal with it, is that, yes, I talk to other people, but I also recognize that we do what we do because we want to do it. We do our damnedest to be competent at what we do. We don't want to make mistakes, and yet on the other hand, we recognize that in playing for real, times are tough now and then. How to put it best, the other thing really is that in being a member of the rescue group, it's taught me to be more competent in many areas of my life. I've gotten more out of the group than I've given it, I think. And that's because you have to be competent in this group. You can't make mistakes. And so you become always very aware of what you're doing and how to do it right. And that translates into other activities. So I think that's another thing that's valuable to the members, is that we've become, each of us, I suspect, more competent in the rest of our lives, just by virtue of this interaction with the group. And that's been very valuable to me. It's made me a better mountaineer. I've learned what not to do. in some of these cases, for sure.
If we'll have maybe one or two questions. I do realize that our core question was, would you tell us stories? And you did.
We did.
And
We did that all night long.
that's the point. That's my point. So we'll take one or two questions, but then we do have a reception, and we won't have the right liquids. I'm sorry to say, we'll only have lemonade-ish kind of liquids, but we would hope to have another opportunity with better liquids to pursue these stories. So I'll take maybe a couple of questions, and then we'll do the event, but there will be people around to chat. So, Carol Ann.
I just wonder what kind of training you all have. I mean, you're obviously competent in the outdoors when you volunteer, but, you know, we used to hike and backpack and all that stuff too, but, I mean, you have to get more training, right?
Yeah, so we have a very rigorous training procedure that's both rigorous and ad hoc at the same time. So we typically look for people that have experience in the outdoors. But that experience can vary. As you've heard, we can be looking for a lost person on Sanitas, or we can be doing something on the Continental Divide in the middle of January. So part of the training is really knowing what your limits are and instilling that in the individual, so that if you are a member of the group but aren't trained, don't have the expertise, don't do it on a regular basis, to go up to the Continental Divide in the middle of January, the training says, I'm going to hang out here and make brownies and bring them up to the trailhead so that people can eat. Okay, that's what my job is. The kind of official training, we have practices basically 2 or 3 times a month. There's a process that you have to go through, a training program that you have to go through. We have little cards on them that you sign off the skills that you need to take, or to be an expert at, to go from just an outdoors person to understanding our systems. And it's what's in our bash kit over there, it's how do you coil our ropes, it's what's in our truck, it's all of these kind of systems to take an outdoor person and turn them into a rescuer. But most importantly, that process proves to the other members of the group that you have the right head on your shoulders, that you have the right kind of personality to be trustworthy, so that when the pager goes off at 2 o'clock in the morning, I can trust that person when I jump off a cliff and they're holding the other end of the rope. And so that's the training aspects of it. So there is a formal process, but it's a lifelong process.
I'm just going to put just some numbers on that. We tell new members, potential new members, that take a couple hundred hours and about a year of training with us on these weekends and Wednesday night lectures. So,
Do people fail? Or?
Yeah, well, most people fail.
That's not the right word.
No. Most people fail because once they get into it, they decide they don't want to do it. We fail if someone gets all the way through the process and then they don't get voted in. So you become a member of the group when the group votes you in, and you go up for a vote, and we all talk about it ad nauseum, and then we do a hands up, hands down, or delay your application for another. So truly, if someone gets to the point where it's at the vote and they don't get in, that's because we haven't done a good job of kind of leading them out. But we get hundreds. We get probably 3 or 4 people inquiring about our organization a week. And we get down to 8 or 10 people who will join a year.
Yeah.
The camaraderie that I got through Chuck, through Jonathan, who was also a group leader, was something that was absolutely intense. I don't know whether one gets it in any other setting, perhaps in military combat or something like that. Is that a reasonable analogy?
Well, we face death, but nobody's shooting at us.
Usually.
Although I have been on a ridge, high in the Rockies, climbing a mountain, and a bullet ricocheted off the rock nearby. It was hunting season, folks. So we immediately climbed to the other side of the ridge.
I've heard people use that term, who can compare except someone who's been in both.
Yeah.
We had a board member in our group, Senate of the American West, named Glenn Porzak. Were any of you wonderful people involved in the mishap he had in Rocky Mountain National Park. A man who's climbed the 7 highest peaks in the 7 continents of the world, and he fell in Rocky Mountain National Park.
It was Indian Peaks.
Well, it was in the Indian Peaks. Yeah, that accident occurred in the Indian Peaks. I was not on that rescue. I know Glenn pretty well from some of his climbing stuff. But that was I can tell you some of the very quick details, very serious accident.
Yes.
It required very great skill and some fear among the members who rescued him, from the standpoint that he was in a gully on essentially between Arapahoe and Paiute Peak on the south side, and in that gully was a tremendous amount of loose rock. So the rescuers were rigging ropes that, instead of pulling rocks down the gully on top of them, had to be kind of nursed over to the side of the gully with direction change slings and so forth to avoid that danger. And he was evac'd down to a level area and then evac'd by helicopter, and as you know, is alive and well today. Funny epilogue to that rescue is that about maybe 1 year later, in fact it was on the anniversary, I happened to be sleeping on top of Audubon, on top of Audubon, which I do from time to time. It's really nice up there. So I'm sleeping, and up comes this guy, and of course it's Glenn. He says, "Hey Chuck, what are you doing up here?" And I said, "Glenn, what are you doing? You're looking pretty good." Well, he'd fully recovered, really. And so that was just a great little accidental meeting.
We're getting pretty, well, okay.
I was just wondering if you all would like to talk a little bit about the way you play. I mean, there was slight whisper of it. But don't I remember lawn chairs and flamingos and barbecue grills being taken to the tops of mountains and silliness going on among all these very serious people?
No, of course not.
That never happened.
No.
I don't know what you're talking about.
None of us had ever climbed the 3rd floor at night under strange circumstances.
Under the full moon, yeah. Now, so the group is a family. The group really is a family, and we do lots of things as families do, including
Flamingos carried to peace. So yes, a lot of families will do that.
We have a snow cave practice that has at times been more about the flamingos and how big a snow cave you can dig. At other times, it's survival under winter conditions. But we have lots of fun people friends that go down and climb mountains, not down, everywhere, all over the world. Lots of people who have gone with Chuck to Nepal to go trekking, or go to Israel to work with other search and rescue teams. So no, it is a very fun family organization that helps build this core of people that the group ends up becoming, and ends up being a big part of your family. Lots of us have found spouses through the rescue group, either in the rescue group or through the rescue group, and best men or best women officiating at weddings and godparents to children, and all of that kind of junk, because it is a family.
Really quick, Lynn, because we're coming down.
I wanted to know how the kid got stuck. I wanted to know why the plane crashed. I wanted to know why someone would leave a blind person there, and if they left them just for 15 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to suggest those are follow-up questions.
I wanted to know why the guy broke his leg. I wanted to know why the ladder. Why did she fall on the ladder? Was it a faulty ladder, or was it?
That's why we're having a reception.
No.
Because actually, I do want to make sure that we get our boards in before the pagers go off again. But it does seem like
the thing is the money. How does this get covered in cases where people are just doing things wrongly, and then we're putting all of this effort? I know it's very good in a close family and everything, but shouldn't it be reserved for the things that really are not, are very valid choices that people are having to make in the high mountains?
Right. So the first question is, or the first answer is, stuff happens. And I think the reason that all of us do this is because all of us are in these positions. We're all climbers. We're all mountaineers. We all would love to have a cabin that we could go. And if there wasn't, all of us see it as we could be the person who's out there who's injured. And so we do this because we feel it's important for our community, but we also do this because it's our friends and it's us that we're protecting in these circumstances. And so that's why we do it, because stuff happens and no one controls it, and some people are stupid, and I could tell stories about kids going and getting trucks stuck up and snowshoeing into them, but that happens, and if that was my kid, I would want someone to go out there and help them, and that's what we're doing. From a cost perspective, the group budget's about $80,000 a year. We get about half of that from the county, thankfully, under the sheriff's office. The other part of it comes from private donations. And again, we're a non-profit, all-volunteer 501c3, and thankfully money is not an issue ever when we do this. I have to worry about the budget every year, and a few of us do, but that's to a degree trivial, because it's no charge and it's a volunteer organization, so it works really well.
The quickest answer to your question is we cannot judge who's worth what.
Yeah.
A person is in danger, a person's life is threatened, we go.
Yeah, well, more.
Lynn, I'm sorry. Lynn, no. Okay, one last question. At the reception,
Happy to talk to you.
Unleashed, but we are getting really close to where we're, yeah, go ahead.
Quick question, I don't know when this happened, but somewhere in the last 20, 30 years, there was a Colorado law passed, the Good Samaritan law. And I'm wondering if and how that affected how you have, how you did and how you did it.
I think I'm not a legal person, okay? It certainly protects us from doing what we're doing. To my knowledge, there has not been a lawsuit against a rescuer anywhere in the state, but it's a security blanket, because the Good Samaritan law basically says that if you don't do harm, then you're protected. Which I think gives security to all of us, but the fact that no one has actually been charged under that.
Even prior to that, it was never.
Right.
Yep.
Never been an issue.
It's never been an issue in our experience.
Well, that's a blessing. I am playing my role, which I do at the center, which is to take people who would like to chat more and tell them to stop chatting. And yet, that is just a temporary postponement, because we are going to do our award, and then everyone will chat their heads off at the reception. So this is a brief interruption.